Good afternoon, everyone, for our session on meeting demand with responsible supply. Appreciate you all hanging in with us. We were originally supposed to be the last session of the day, so I had this great dad joke prepared about how we were closing it out. Unfortunately, we are now the third to last session of the day, so we're going to have to let that stand. Joined by four great panelists today, we're going to start off with Mr. Tyler Mitchelson, the Senior Vice President of Copper Growth at Teck Resources. We've got next Mr. Loudon Owen, Chief Executive Officer of DLT Labs. Welcome.
Thank you.
Next, we have Mr. Jonathan Evans, Chief Executive Officer and President of Lithium Americas.
Good to see you, Ernie. How are you?
Good to be. And last but not least, we have Mr. Paul Myler, Deputy Head of Mission for the Embassy of Australia and the former Australian Ambassador to the Russian Federation and the countries of Central Asia. Awesome. Thanks for coming. Gentlemen, please have a seat. Now, it might seem at the top that having a panel talking about meeting demand with responsible supply with two industry representatives, a technology executive, and a policymaker might seem incongruous, but there is a connective tissue that I really want to explore here today, and I think it'll become evident as we go through the conversation. I want to start with John at Lithium Americas. We're talking today, as we said, about meeting demand with responsible supply. We had General Motors here earlier today. You signed a $650 million deal with General Motors earlier this year for the Thacker Pass project in Nevada. That project has faced some pushback, and I'm wondering if you could sort of talk us through how you navigated the social license to operate and got to where you are today.
Thanks, Ernie. Yeah, so we're really excited to get started in Nevada. We're under construction now. It's the only fully permitted, fully integrated site in construction actually on the continent. And obviously all the material will be going to General Motors for the first 10 years with an option for 5 more just for phase 1. We spent several years working with the community, not only the local community, bringing in an outside facilitator to start a concerned citizens group, bringing in experts to demystify what the permitting terminology was, the type of technology that we were using and so forth, but also listening to them on what their needs are, and that community is going to grow. We're going to have somewhere north of 300 full-time jobs. And just to give folks perspective, Humboldt County in northern Nevada is about half the state of Connecticut in size, has 16,000 people living in it. 10,000 of them live in the city of Winnemucca, so it's a pretty sparsely populated area. And then working with the tribal First Nations group in on the border with Oregon, which is the Fort McDermott Reservation. 3 years ago, we did a job skills mapping with them. We worked in conjunction with the state. We started job skills training with them. We've included them as cultural monitors during the permitting process and actually started to hire some of their tribal members. I'll round that out actually with labor in general, because I know that'll come up in this, and that we're working now on an MOU and a PLA with the AFL-CIO, which we hope to have executed this week as well. And that's important not only during the construction phase, but also that they bring top-class apprenticeship programs, because we really want to teach lifelong skills, because these are generational jobs. This first phase has a life of 40 years. This deposit's the third largest in the world, and some geologists with the USGS believe it's the largest on the world itself. It's 600 million tons. So it's got many, many iterations of expansions it can do over its life to support our supply chain in North America.
Awesome, thanks, John. Tyler, I want to turn to you at Teck Resources. In Minnesota last year, Teck formed a joint venture with Glencore's PolyMet to develop copper and nickel projects in that state. And one of the projects top of mind right now for you is the NorthMet project that PolyMet has been trying to advance, but you've been facing some pushback. I'm wondering, sort of a similar question as with John, how are you navigating that social license to operate, and what are sort of next steps to move the project forward?
Yeah, I guess maybe start with a bit of context. At Teck, we're a 100-year-old mining company and a sustainability leader in our industry, and recognized for that in many different associations. I think we operate 10 operations across US, Canada, Chile, Peru, and our focus has always been on sustainability and being responsible miners. We've got a large pipeline of projects that's going to allow us to add, give or take, about 1.5 million tons, which is about 3.3 billion tons of nickel, copper, zinc, platinum, palladium, and the New Range deposit is one of those. And I think for us, it's the philosophy that we've had and Teck's had for years. It's responsible, sustainable development. And that's the approach we've taken with New Range as well. It's a 50-50 joint venture, as you said, with Polymet. It is I call it a quasi-brownfield development. It's utilizing and repurposing existing infrastructure from old iron ore mines that are there and taking advantage of that to build the mine. Our first step, as we do with everything, is early engagement. And I think, prior to the joint venture, Polymet, and we had our Masaba deposit there as well, did an incredible job of reaching out to local communities, reaching out to your indigenous groups, the tribal groups around, trying to make sure that we first engaged early, but also listened first and offered answers later. Trying to understand what the challenges are in the places that you work, and I think that applies across the whole world. That way you can actually engage in true dialogue with people. And I think, the deposit is quite amazing. If you look at it, it's a copper nickel PG or platinum palladium deposit. It's probably, if you look at the deposit and the inherent resource, it's probably second largest in the world, certainly the largest in North America. And it's a great opportunity for us for that long-term view. So spending the time up front early, engaging, and actually going through and explaining, I wish I had some pictures here of what a modern mine looks like. And I don't know, show of hands for anybody in the room that's actually seen a modern mine. Well, I've got a few.
Maybe you could talk a little bit, I mentioned the phrase quasi-brownfield. John is going to build a brand new mine, North America's largest lithium mine, but for those not familiar in the audience, what is a quasi-brownfield, and can you describe what is at the site right now?
So at the site right now is a historical iron ore mine that's been there. So there was a large, I think the building is almost a half a mile long, processing facility that's there. There's an existing
building is a half a mile long, you said?
Yes.
Okay, there's a lot going on there.
The single largest building I've ever seen in my life.
Okay.
So our idea is we will strip the equipment out, put in the new equipment there. We'll rely on the existing rail line that's there right now. There's a tailings facility there that's available right now. And I think one of the key things is you've got a skill set and a mining history in the area. And it is right next to the North Met deposit that's been mined for quite a number of years. So we're going to be mining copper, nickel, platinum, palladium out of it, but it's utilizing the existing facility that was there.
Gotcha. For John and Tyler, before we move on to our other two guests, we had John Podesta here earlier today, Senior Advisor to President Biden, who made a very public promise on this stage that his door is open. You both are in D.C. Can I ask you, will you be availing yourselves of that opportunity?
Well, I can speak is that we do have some meetings set up, not with Mr. Podesta, but certainly that's one of the things as we go through looking at how do we sustainably and responsibly develop something. Permitting is always a challenge, and the litigation is always a challenge in the U.S. We've done a lot of work engaging here in Washington, but certainly in the state of Minnesota, working with multiple parties there to first explain what we are trying to do. I think there's a lot of perceptions around what a mine is and what a mine isn't. So the team's done a great job of, pictures worth 1,000 words. What we'd like to do is get more people up to site, get boots on the ground, and be able to see what's actually there so people can understand what we're doing and how we're trying to sustainably mine this and create something that's long-term sustainable.
Gotcha. John, maybe same question to you.
We've had a great relationship. The administration's been hugely supportive. All the different agencies, whether it's Interior, Energy, and there's a whole host of other agencies involved. The policy that's come out, which we didn't expect, the Inflation Reduction Act, has really supercharged the industry. The LPO office is doing a wonderful job. We're in the final steps to get a loan granted this year as well, and the outreach and the engagement has been great. They brought top-class people on, either as consultants or full-time employees, and the government has really ramped up quickly, and they say what they mean, and they mean what they say.
Great, awesome. Loudon, I want to turn to you, given your expertise at DLT, and I think one of the things that I've been most intrigued by is the rising interest by consumers into how and where the minerals that are used to build EVs and other staples of the green energy transition are procured. We heard Abby Wolf earlier today mention the term digital identifier, sort of tracking from mine to manufacturer these minerals. It's a bit of a confusing concept, so can you walk us through what you do and sort of how you're able to track that and guarantee that with certainty to your clients?
So the company is called DLT Labs, and we work with some of the leading mining companies in the world, one of whom is on my right, Teck. And what we do, amongst other things, is we manage the flow of information right from the origination of the mine all the way through to the end. And I'll explain what that means. So we acquire and ingest all information that is relevant. So for example, what time of the day, where, how much ore, what was the density, what was the, any of the various elements that you need to know. And then we track it all the way through the supply chain. So in this particular case, we're talking about germanium. Anyone know what germanium is? Anyway, you're all using it in your fiber optics. And germanium comes from a mine up in Alaska called Red Dog. It's got to be mined, obviously. It's interesting. It holds a lot of other minerals together with it. For example, zinc, which are called credits in the industry, and has value. So we will track everything that happens as it exits the mine and moves through the transportation process, as it moves from one mode of transportation to another, and then ultimately goes all the way downstream, in this case to a very large glass manufacturer. Can I say who it is? To Corning Glass. And that's where it is processed into telecommunications fiber optics. So at each point where there's information to be acquired and brought into the family, the blockchain, we call it family, that information is ingested and stored. And then the real benefit, of course, is at the time of processing. So it's great, and I've really enjoyed hearing everybody talking about transparency and visibility, but it's nice also to have profitability. And so what happens is, by having the information available, it enhances the processing and allows for very significant savings. So what happens I shouldn't be talking about the mining industry, but I will. What happens in the mining industry is it's very, very precise as to what you process, and you have to continually adjust. If you don't know what's coming in, you don't know what comes out. So that's what we do together with industry leaders. We do it in agriculture, we do it in transportation with Walmart, we do it in a host of different areas.
So earlier today, we were hearing a lot of speakers talk about how if we want to have more secure and sustainable and safe supply chains, perhaps we'll be paying more for copper, lithium, nickel, and other minerals moving forward to ensure that the worst human abuses aren't inflicted upon parts of the supply chain. It sounds like you're putting that on its head and saying that perhaps that the price will need to be down, but we'll still have safe supply chains. Can you unpack that a little bit more?
Yes, I disagree entirely with the concept that this should be just an added cost. My experience in working with this particular technology is it enables massive savings. And I can give you some stats. So for example, at Walmart Canada, which is our anchor account where we tested and proved this out over the course now of close to 5 years, we've saved them $100 million. And if you map that to Walmart US, you can do the math, because Canada's not quite as big a market as the US market. Close. In my view, the industry has had a bad rap. The whole issue of transparency and visibility, yes, there can be a capex up front, but there should be an economic return. And as a corporate belief, we think that sustainability means profitability. Sustainability means being able to save money and being able to serve your customers and clients not simply with elements which satisfy the social requirements, but also economic requirements. And that is the opportunity. And that is where, frankly, in a lot of the allies and a lot of the developed world that we're operating in, I'm amazed that people are sleeping on it, because it's huge savings.
So unpack that a little bit more. You mentioned the $100 million savings for Walmart, and we'll let Walmart be to the side. But if I hypothetically were a mining CEO on a panel with a reporter from Reuters, how could I get a chunk of that $100 million? If I'm going from my mine to my end customer, what are some specifics? And forgive me if this is a stupid question, but I also think about shipping. What's to stop somebody from infiltrating that shipment on way and sort of screwing with what DLT does?
Sure. I mean, we can't provide that people will behave properly, and no one can expect it. What we can do is we can acquire any information, synchronize it, draw it together, and use it. How do you use it? It would probably be good to know if you're drinking coffee or tea. It'd probably be good to know if you have a vehicle that is 10 feet high and the entrance is 8 feet high, all that information contributes to being able to process much, much more efficiently. And so if you look at, in the gold industry, for example, I've personally seen $30 to $40 million lost in a year where it was inefficient processing. And there was a lack of knowledge as to what was actually going into the processing facility because it's very precise. And if you talk about how big these facilities are and how complex they are, I mean, this is very complex chemistry. So what I will tell a mining CEO or anyone else from the mining industry is I believe there's a lot of enormous savings in addition to all the benefits, which are huge and very, very important in terms of visibility by using this type of technology. It's simply better information and it's real-time actionable data.
So we've seen a lot about server farms and crypto, and are you the same thing? Do you have like somebody in a basement with 500 servers? Is there similarity there or not? I don't know.
So there are two religions, at least. One is the crypto religion, which is blockchain using massive servers, mining, and the belief that the entire globe needs a new way of exchanging value. There's a second religion, which is the core technology, distributed ledger technology. We're the second of those two. So we do not have issues. We don't have to do mining. We simply use this technology to...
Crypto mining, you mean? You don't have to do...
Sorry?
You don't have to do crypto mining.
No, we don't have to do crypto
Right,
mining.
right.
Yes. Other
Getting our
people do the
terms.
mining. We manage the information. But no, they're completely different universes, and I think they get confused very often. And I think you've seen, from any number of perspectives, why it's important to embrace new technologies, but also to be careful. So on the crypto side, we stay far away from that.
Gotcha. Thank you. Paul, I'd love to turn to you. We've heard from Canada and other countries. Great to have Australia here with us, and wonder if we could zero in specifically on Western Australia, obviously long known as a great source of mined minerals and metals across the spectrum, especially for the green energy transition. But Western Australia is now sort of pivoting to build up its processing capacity as well. Can you talk us through efforts to go further downstream in Western Australia, and what does that look like from the government's perspective?
Sorry, that was a little bit loud. Look, we are, Western Australia in particular, I'm representing the federal government, so although I'm a Perth boy, so I suppose I should be able to roll off the West Australian stats.
There we go.
But certainly, the sort of increase in supply that we need to support energy transition and the like, just enormous. The concentration of that supply and the processing at the moment is clearly one of the major problems in the industry. It hampers, from where we sit as government policymakers, it hampers the ability for sort of long-term sustainable price signals to the industry as to what needs to be developed and where. We see over and over green shoots sprouting and then sort of becoming unviable economically because of the way the market operates at the moment. So there's a big commitment in Australia to increase our role in processing, to become a more tangible part of a diversified supply chain in these minerals. At a federal level, we've got the Australian government's got a critical minerals facility worth around $2 billion, with $1.3 billion US to de-risk early to mid-stage projects. We've got $10 billion US in a national reconstruction fund to provide loans, guarantees and equity to rebuild Australia's industrial base. We've got a value-adding in resources fund, about 660 million, and US $2 billion to invest in green metals as part of Powering Australia. There's a national battery strategy, on and on. I think, given the scale of the supply chain diversification task, all of us are going to need to step up on processing. It's not it's not a competition thing at this stage amongst the sort of like-minded nations. Obviously, at an individual corporate level it is, but this challenge at a strategic level has stepped beyond whether we're earning more money from critical minerals than Canada or vice versa. It's how we get the product available to the end consumer in a way that meets the sort of ESG standards that we all expect these days. And I mean, I think my briefing notes say that a big part of the problem is that there's no price premium paid for ESG.
We have a
And so I was
disagreement.
trying to reconcile the fact that that point had just been debunked. But I think the point is still valid in that if you have a mine or a processing plant or whatever that's operating in the West, operating under a robust regulatory regime, meeting labour standards, etc., 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 then you are struggling in the market. There are competitors out there that are able to undercut you significantly. So there is, I mean, ceteris paribus, you need a price premium. Now, you can generate the price premium in a number of different ways. Greater efficiency might be one of those ways. So, maybe it's the technology leap in terms of the compliance with sustainability standards that you get from the blockchain that provide you that that build in that price premium that allow you to compete. But until everybody's on the same at the same standards, then it's going to be a challenge.
Can I get our other three panelists, maybe starting with Loudon, to react to what Paul was just saying on there?
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt that at different stages in the development of, call it ESG, call it visibility, there's a CapEx associated with it, and that has to be returned. But what we have found, we didn't know this was going to happen, okay? We didn't know. So we started out managing inbound freight. I don't know how excited people get about inbound freight.
This crowd gets very excited.
Okay, I get super excited about it now.
Let's dig into that.
So it was about 500,000 loads a year, inbound freight into a distribution center. Sounds simple. And at the beginning of working on that project, it was the number of actual deliveries wasn't known. So people talk about data, all this theory about have all the information and simply need to aggregate it. We didn't even know how many deliveries there were to begin with. And so what happened was, and the reason we were engaged in it is there were a lot of disputes between the carriers, the transportation companies, and the end account, which is Walmart. This is public. It's in the Walmart, Walmart has publicized this extensively. It's in Harvard Business Review, so I can talk about it. And what happened was, we thought, okay, let's try and solve this problem where they keep fighting over who's supposed to get paid how much when. That was the issue. It was over the accounts. And the reason is it was a low fixed cost, many variable costs. They're hard to track. So we started tracking it. And in the space of 60 days, we configured and came up with a solution that would manage this information, all this very complex information. And everybody thought that was great. So hopefully there won't be any more disputes. But then what did we find out? Well, all of a sudden, we found out tremendous efficiencies. We found out that billions is being spent on fuel, and that fuel wasn't being managed collectively. It was being purchased here and paid for later, and all these different inefficiencies. And we also realized that now that we had this information synchronized, we could do something that was much more important, which was we could take action. So when goods were in danger of, they were perishable goods, in danger of being lost, for example, all of a sudden, no. If we have the information, it's actionable. When Walmart was spending $3 billion on trying to identify where they should have new distribution centers, they used all this data. So what happened is, over time, we didn't know this. It was a complete discovery. We thought we were simply enhancing visibility and transparency, but it became this massive cost saving. And then the other part of it that happened, I get a little excited, so I'll just go on for one more second,
Please.
Is businesses artificially broken up into these little segments. We all know about silos, but why is one function separate from another? Well, because in large part, certainly on the data side, it started that way. So somebody started with a little package here, and there's software for managing inventory, and it's different for managing, you know, the temperature in the building. It's different for managing payments, and it's different for managing information flow to the management team. But you don't need to have them all separate. So what happened was, by integrating the information, by synchronizing it, now we were able to offer financial services. So Walmart makes money, and Walmart is a fabulous client, by the way. It's one of the most innovative companies on the planet from what I've seen. But what happened was Walmart realized, well, wait a second, now that we know who to pay how much when, and there's certainty, we can offer to pay at a discount. And maybe the trucking companies would like that. Well, they do. So all of a sudden, when you break down the sort of artificial distinctions in the process, when you synchronize the information, you get, yes, all the benefits of earning credibility for indelible transactions and all the social benefits, but you also improve the process dramatically. And that's where I think the advantage is. It's just sitting there. It's waiting for people to capitalize on it, and it's available today. And I don't know if people trust Harvard Business Review. It's pretty good. I mean, it's not a bad publication. It's not quite as good as INSEAD, by the way, but it's a good publication. But I mean, here's a very well-defined analysis as to what the savings are today that also give you the transparency benefits.
Maybe we could get Teck and Tyler to talk a little bit about this, since we've got sort of two competing philosophies here on the stage, and someone who's doing it in the real world in the mining sector. Sort of your reflections on, have you guys seen cost savings?
Well, I think maybe go back to first principles around, you know, responsible, sustainable mining. What does that really mean? And I think, you know, you can bucket it up a number of different ways, but maybe simplistically, you start with that responsible engagement. So how are you talking to, you know, First Nation groups that there, the local communities, whether it's state, federal, regulators, union environment, and truly understanding what those needs are, particularly when you're developing a new project. You take a lot of that information, you understand what your ore body is, back to your data, and being able to use that advanced technology to be able to design your mine. And there is that responsible design component. Anybody can throw a bunch of footprint around with, here's your mine, here's your tailings, here's your waste rock, here's where your building's gonna go. Plenty of opportunity in that from a sustainability perspective to really understand what's your creativity in design. How can we save money in that, but also deliver on those sustainable benefits at the same time? And I think that's part of using the data that's available, but understanding what the expectations are, and understanding, again, looking forward, what's your carbon footprint that's gonna be, how do we design for that? What is your mine closure? What is the legacy on this? So you design that up front. So when you're doing the execution, you're actually thinking with the end in mind for some of these as well. And then you start working through the project execution part. It's understanding where your local labor opportunities, where are the efficiencies you can gain from that, to gain your community support, to be able to ensure that you're doing this in the most cost-effective way. There's always different ways to build things, and being really, really smart about that, and you need the data to be able to do that as well. And then in operation, it's really around understanding how your mine's working right from the ore body, through the processing facilities, and all the way through that value chain until you get that final product in there. And it's living up to your commitments that you've made, whether they're environmental, community, operational commitments to your shareholders, as to the returns you promised. I think if you pull all of that together and you do it early and you think about it up front, it may cost you a little bit more, but in the end, I think your efficiency is going to come through, that you're actually going to be able to run the operation more efficiently. Your capital is going to be better and more efficiently planned over the life of that mine, so you can be competitive. Doesn't take away from short-term blips where you have other players across the world that are shortcutting a lot of these things, but I see that as the short term. When you're dealing with mines that are plus 20 years, you think of that long-term and the long-term sustainability, and you can be very profitable in that.
Gotcha. John, I know you're in construction mindset right now, but I'm wondering, have you sort of thought forward to operations, and if some of this blockchain technology will be part of the Thacker Pass site?
Yeah, look, I mean, first I'll kind of go back to a lot of different points discussed. There was one discussion and point around incentives. There is an incentive. There's an incentive with the IRA to have material from certain regions. And there's a real incentive to build in the US because there's a permanent tax credit associated with that. Canada and Australia are doing things as well, but we're all on the same team. And that's an incentive to get projects built in these geographies. the other piece is that none of these projects that are not economically viable, so kind of going back to your MBA class, if they're the marginal cost, you're not even getting a loan from the government, let alone from a bank. The LPO office approaches things exactly like a bank does in terms of you get a low cost of capital, but am I going to get a return on my investment because I'm lending you taxpayer money. So it has to be the right project in the right place, permitted correctly, and that actually comes down to some of the points that some of these gentlemen have brought up around smart design right from the beginning. A lot of this is good business practice. You're not going to find a facility like this in downtown Washington, D.C. You don't have neighbors for the most part. They're remote areas. Some of them are water stressed. A lot of them have labor, lack of labor actually as well. So you've got to do a lot of this on your own right from the very, very beginning. That comes down to smart, efficient design, automation, tracking of data, online analytics and so forth, and that you can lose a lot of money very quickly if one of these facilities doesn't run right, given the upfront cost. If you look at capital intensities in Australia, the US, Canada as well, these projects aren't cheap. These are multi-billion-dollar projects. So right from the very beginning, you want to make sure you get it done right, because a lot of these, you look at 20 years, but some of these projects can go 40 or 50 years. If you're going to invest and put this kind of iron in the ground, you want to make sure that you're going to have a very high reasonable success of actually getting your return on your investment. In the end, you want to bring private capital in. It's great what the government is doing, but the government shouldn't have to pay for this. To attract foreign outside private investors, they expect a return on their money and a good business case that begins right with the community involvement, the permitting strategy, the design of the plant, how the site's constructed, is it expandable, what's the asset look like, how much water is available, how much are you recycling. All of those things are actually elemental in actually how you put these projects together.
Gotcha, and I know there's broadly been a lot of interest in Thacker Pass for many years. You were nearly at the finish line. Can you sort of update the audience on where you are? I believe you started construction?
We have, yeah.
Okay.
We're fully permitted. There was an appeal. We won the appeal. There was a stay to that appeal that was denied. I know we're in great shape. We're moving dirt at this point. There is heavy equipment on site. Bechtel's been mobilized since November. They're on the ground as well. They'll actually be our EPCM. They're actually already out doing workforce development as well, in addition to Sawtooth Mining, who's part of North American Coal, who's actually our mining contractor for the life of the project. And bringing them in early was important as well. They've been mobilized for 3 years. So they're going to be training folks. They actually operated Bisti, which was the Navajo reservation. It was a large coal mining operation. So training, heavy equipment operation. They'll have about 60 people full-time. And they were involved right from the very beginning on the mine planning. And on the reclamation plan, we're actually doing concurrent reclamation. So no more than about 30% of the pit is exposed at any one particular time. We actually start backfilling by year 6. So it's a unique project up front, but this is very much measure twice, cut once. And that's one of the reasons why it's taken us a while to come up with an updated feasibility study, and for us to actually step forward. We're actually done at this
Just
point.
to explain for the audience, so backfill, you're basically filling in the hole not long after you dig it. So
Exactly.
So you're not having a giant crater left when you're done at the end of the project.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha. Paul, I want to turn to you briefly. We've been talking about the Inflation Reduction Act broadly here at the thematic of the conference. Could you, 2 questions, reflect on how it's being perceived in Australia among government and as well as industry, and what is Australia's own plan to develop its own national strategies to support the critical mineral sector within its own borders?
Yeah, it's changed the math. So there's no going back. It's here to stay. I think everybody sees the complexity in the Inflation Reduction Act. On critical minerals, it's a slam dunk for us. I mean, it's great. Works for us really well. We've already seen GM and Stellantis announced agreements for production supply of battery minerals in Australia in the past 6 months. We've seen offtake agreements with Tesla and others. We also have the resources necessary for a really significant hydrogen industry. I think the hydrogen elements of the IRA are going to distort global investment a little bit. the incentives are just too good to not come to the US. So that's going to be something that the Australian government is sort of trying to work through now and work out how they respond to that to maintain our competitive position. But at the end of the day, it was the sort of move that was needed to change the maths, and once you change the maths, everything starts flowing from there. As I said, I ran through some of the things that we're doing. We're running through the moment a critical minerals strategy. I think it's due to be released in the next month or so. And we've got a national battery strategy, including putting some money towards building a battery manufacturing precinct in Queensland. So there's a fair bit going on. I think when we've been talking about critical minerals and the risks around supply chains since 2012, I think, wasn't it, when Japan was cut off for a period there. It's taken a decade of talking to actually see somebody do something really, really decisive that changed the scene. So full credit to Senator Manchin and the Congress here for really making that decisive act. And I mean, we're certainly wanting to work very closely. We're working in the Quad to try and generate between Australia, US, India and Japan an investors network that can really mobilise private sector capital in support of critical minerals. And then people may not be tracking the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which is the White House initiative to try and present an economic offering, which isn't a trade agreement, to the countries, in particular Southeast Asia. I mean, as we sit in Australia, resilient critical mineral supply chains that don't include Indonesia don't make any sense. So that's one route where we may be able to get Indonesia bought into these supply chains. Whether or not we can get them somehow to fit in under the IRA is going to be the next question. Comes down to how tangible is IPEF in terms of an actual trade agreement at the end of the negotiation.
Is that because of standards in Indonesia and mining, or something else?
Well, I think that, but just you've got 330 million people, and you've got a lot of resource, and you've got some capacity to do some processing as well. So, yeah.
Gotcha. In the time that we have left, we're going to throw it open to the broader panel for a question around labor. Earlier this year, we saw one of the major copper producers here in the country, not Teck, but a different one, forecast a 1% drop in their copper production for 2023, not because of extraneous factors, but because they just don't have enough workers. That is, they're saying, we're not going to produce as much copper because we don't have enough people on staff. This is an existential problem for the industry, and I wondered if you could each talk about what you're doing at your company or your country, or even in the tech sector. Maybe you don't have folks that want to associate with mining, what you're doing, what the industry should be doing to attract labor and talent. Because if we're back here in 5 years, this could be an existential risk for the entire industry. I guess we'll start with Tyler.
Sure. I think one of the opportunities is the whole focus on critical minerals. It's now, I think people were saying earlier this week or yesterday or today, it's now sexy. So it's actually brought it to the forefront, where I think mining is going to have, and mineral development is going to have a much better reputation more broadly across the potential workforce that's out there. We've had our own challenges of trying to attract workforce, particularly remote locations.
Sure.
You either have to live out there, or you're in some sort of roster basis of 2 weeks in, 2 weeks out, or whatever it happens to be. So it can be a bit challenging. I think the engagement with local communities where we work, and if I look at our project portfolio, our focus has been on how do we try to get local labor. So you're focusing on that training part. You're looking at what apprenticeship programs you set up. Even in these early stages, we've set up scholarship programs across the board. And it's trying to engage as much as you can in the local area to be able to get those people interested in coming to work for you. And then it's the ongoing leadership that has to come with each one of the mine sites that's operating and providing those opportunities going forward. It's not going to be easy, particularly as there's the desire to grow the mining industry. You're going to need more people. Where are they going to come from? So it's going to be important that we continue to attract that talent, train the talent. You're not going to find, it's previous experience in Australia, you're not going to find experienced people. You got to take them off the street. You have to invest the time and effort to actually train them up as to be able to do what you need to do at the mine site.
And do you have a lot of job openings right now at Teck?
Better now than it was, I'd say, 8 months ago.
Okay.
But there is still, a vacancy rate there that we're still working on.
Okay.
I think the other aspect is understanding, your technology and your automation. How can that help us out? Whether it's autonomous trucks or processing plants using the technology in the digital world in control rooms. There's opportunities in that, and I think all of those have to come together for us to build out the resource base to be able to build the infrastructure that we need.
Paul, in Australia, I'm curious how you are looking at the labor issue. We think of Australia as a very strong mining history and legacy. Mining executives, love to talk about the high labor costs in Australia historically. But is this a structural issue for the country's mining sector in Australia? And if so, what are things the government is trying to do to abrogate it?
Yeah, look, I think it is. I mean, workforce, obviously, we've got, or we will have, almost a competition within our economy for the same workforce, in the sense that you've got people competing from the mining sector. We've now got a significant defence industry, a lot of shipbuilding. We've just taken on the process of a decadal process of building nuclear submarines. It's going to need 10,000 workers on that project. Over and over again, there's a lot there. Look, I think what we said about the importance of critical minerals and
That it's sexy.
Yeah, well, a realisation of what the mission of mining is actually about is one of creation, not destruction, sort of thing. I mean, we've been through this for so long in Australia, but my son. If you look at it, how do you get involved in mining? Automation. He's mad about automation and robotics and everything else. Would love to be involved. Transition to climate transition. Wants to be part of that. Where else are you going to be part of that other than working with critical minerals, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, the package of mining comes together in a really promising way. I think the job of selling it as a career now is maybe going to get a bit easier.
And Loudon, do you have trouble recruiting folks to do technology that is mining adjacent, or is this just not a problem for you recruiting?
I didn't think we would, but we had people asking.
Really?
Because a lot of the crew are younger, and they're I think perhaps more socially conscious, and they were concerned. Actually, we were, and I was shocked because look, I think mining has been very unfairly stigmatized. Certainly, there are good mining companies and there are bad mining companies. It's that simple. We wouldn't work with a bad mining company. We won't do it. Don't need to, won't do it. But yes, it was a concern raised. So we actually ended up presenting at the PDAC, which is a annual conference in Toronto, a very large mining conference, Prospector Developers Association. We ended up educating internally, and then people were actually pretty excited. And when they start to appreciate what mining represents, what it achieves, what the challenges are, and what we could contribute to it, then we had genuine support. But I was surprised.
Did you have anyone leave or refuse to work with a mining-related project?
No, if they refused to work on it, they would leave, but for other reasons. No, we didn't have that happen.
And John, you, as we said earlier, you're just starting out with construction. How has it been on talent recruitment and retention for you?
Look, it's been great for us. Look, I hate to say this, I'm one of the oldest employees in the company when I go out to Nevada. So we have a collaboration with the University of Nevada at Reno. We have an active internship program, which is national in nature. We have people seeking us out. So it's good to explain how the industry works here a little bit. We make a refined product at the site. When it leaves the gate, it's essentially a pharmaceutical grade product that can go into a cathode. So if you look at the $2 billion price tag, about 60 million is the mining part. The rest is, it looks like, especially chemical plants. So if you look at our staff, it's heavy chemical engineering, metallurgists, chemists, analytical chemists, and we've had great luck hiring people. At any one particular time, we have about 15 or 20 requisitions open. We're filling them. We're hiring people from regulators, people from oil and gas when I come. And it's not just young people. It's folks that are mid-career or late career that want to switch their stripes and come out of oil and gas or chemical to come into the industry. My daughter even, I use this example. My daughter just graduated last May. She had job offers from Goldman Sachs and a bunch of other people's, but she had an offer from the National Renewable Energy Lab. That's the job she took. She goes, this is a hot sector. I want to learn right from the very beginning, moved to Golden, Colorado, and is loving life. So it's partly how you communicate it. Folks like working on this, both young and old alike, because you're part of something big here, whether it's economic, national security, climate change. It's a really important initiative, and it's amongst our partners and friends here. It's a global issue, and I think people really approach it that way. So no, we haven't been having a lot of problems actually at all.
Gotcha, interesting, thank you. We're almost to time here, but I wondered if I could ask each panelist a one-sentence answer to this question, and we'll sort of start with Paul and come this way. What's the one thing you think folks don't understand about the modern mining industry and where we are today?
Well, I think what we just heard there, you know, it's not actually shovels in the ground, or a large part of it isn't shovels in the ground.
I like to use the example, again, I'm old enough to remember, when I was growing up, you had lap belts, no airbags, no nothing on cars. You can't build like cars like that anymore. It's illegal. And if you look at mines today and mining operations, I mean, Teck is a great example. They're really complicated operations. You're talking about blockchain here. We're talking about all kinds of automation and so forth, autonomous trucks and so forth. It's high tech. And with that, you overlay a permitting regime, which is very strict, on top of really you're dealing with state-of-the-art technology. So it's not what people think watching on 60 Minutes that was built 50 years ago. That's not what we're talking about here.
Gotcha. Loudon?
I'm going to take a different approach and maybe surprise you. I think the most extraordinary thing about the mining industry is the people. I think they're probably among the most dedicated people to genuine stewardship of our environment I've ever met. And I think there are all these publicized, sort of media coverage of the industry, but it's simply untrue. And I think they're extraordinary stewards of our environment.
Gotcha. Tyler?
Look, I think the modern day mine is responsible, it's sustainable, it's technologically advanced, and it's an exciting industry to be in with a long future.
Well, gentlemen, thank you all for your time, and thank you the audience for joining us. Please give our panel a round of applause. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay.